Hi, this is Jeff Tokenaga from Stockton, California. I play at Lahontan Golf Club. This is Golf Smarter number 977.
If I can let everyone get a peek behind the curtain of the golf coach here, there's a bit of a power trip that happens with coaching where someone's hitting it poorly, I change something, boom, they're hitting it well. How good am I? Brilliant. On the flip side, there are cases where you say something and they don't get it and it's not working. And again, not everything, but a lot of the things we see online are edited. They're made to look like everything works every time. But coaching's really hard and golf is really, really hard sport. So it's not going to be there every time. But with coaches, sometimes there's a sort of washing of their hands of responsibility of, they just didn't get it, or they just got to put in the time. Whereas I say, well, actually, maybe you didn't get it. Maybe the advice needs to be better, or how you conduct the session needs to be better. So really, I'm positive when people come to me and say, I just get the impression that what I'm saying isn't really the answer, because it shows there is a critical side.
Unlocking the secret to finding your perfect golf coach with Anthony McCarthy checking in from Spain.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Anthony.
Hey, Fred. Great to be here. Looking forward to having a really nice conversation.
Well, thank you. I am looking forward to that as well because I like talking to golf coaches. I think that the primary base of this podcast is to talk to coaches who can help us all become better, smarter golfers, obviously. And any opportunity to talk to, especially after the President's Cup weekend, to talk to international coaches is even
Absolutely.
better.
Yeah.
As we're recording this the day after the President's Cup has finished. You're in Spain?
I am in Spain, so I'm in southeast of Spain, but hopefully you can tell from my accent, it's not a Spanish accent, it's an English accent. So I'm originally from London, but I've been over here for 12, 13 years, and I was the director of the golf academy at La Manga Club, which has quite a good reputation in Spain. It has connections with Palmer and Player and Ballesteros. So I was very happy to be there, and in general, it's a very good place to be.
So, what made the trek? How did you get to Spain from England?
Yeah, I did a couple education courses in England and the one in Holland, and I was really, to give you just a quick rundown. I was actually planning to be a sports teacher, a PE teacher at school. I very quickly realized after a placement in a school that probably that wasn't my calling. So then I did a coaching course, I did a separate coaching course and realized, coaching and golf was always my passion. So I originally came over to play, not with any sort of high hopes of being a player, but just I thought, hey, to be a coach, I need to be a half decent player. So came over here, then met what would be my wife, and then the rest is history. I'm sure it's a well told tale, that one.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The details we don't want to share. So, what is the state of golf in Spain?
It's pretty good. It had a massive dip around recession time, and this is recession sort of around circa 2008 sort of thing. Right. A lot of courses got built with housing on it. Then obviously the world went through a bit of an issue there, and unfortunately a lot of places went bust. But now it's working its way up. I always think with Spain, it's probably more of a class divide with golf. It's sort of more, you've got to be more for the affluent. In Europe, obviously States it's more accessible. But in general, it's absolutely trending in the right direction.
Is that separation from the classes? Is that because there's not a lot of public golf? Is it all mostly private golf?
Yeah, it's a lot of private golf. There's very, very little public golf. I can't even think. Okay, in the whole region where I am, there's one sort of pitch and putt. The vast
Little
majority,
9-hole.
yeah, exactly. The vast majority are private. So yeah, that's where there's a bit of a gap there. There's a bit of a divide.
Is that an issue? I mean, how is it that we can encourage, or is there no interest in, I mean, the kids are playing soccer, I'm sure, football, but how do you get children interested in golf at a young age there?
It is a tough one. There is always that misconception, I suppose, that it is for, like I said, for the more affluent. The thing where I am, so I'm in a region called Murcia in the southeast of Spain, and I suppose a lot of golf in the whole of Spain just depends on tourism. So really, there's not a lot of Spanish people playing golf, but there's a hell of a lot of Scandinavians, British, German, French that come in and play, and those are the ones that are really playing in Spain. But yeah, it's not ideal for the actual Spanish to play.
Interesting. And yet Spain has produced some pretty famous golfers.
Unbelievable. And that was, I don't know if you saw it, Fred, over the weekend, in Madrid, the playoff between John Rahm and Hidalgo. Fantastic. And obviously with a history by Esteros Olazábal, it's got a rich history.
It does, but it's not generating new players, right?
No.
I mean, based on what you're saying, it doesn't sound like that it's generating interest in the masses.
It's a good point. For the masses, no. And normally, I suppose like Ballesteros or Olazábal, they'd be sort of exceptions. They are generating players. So if you see on the DP World Tour, there are still a hell of a lot of Spanish. But again, my guess would be, and I'm not going to hold my hat on this, they would be, again, coming from more affluent backgrounds.
Yeah, of course. And is that a concern for golfers that we can't open it up to more people, or is just there's other sporting interests?
I think other sporting interests, like I'd say with it, I don't have my finger on the pulse of it completely here, but
sure.
the football, soccer is the be all end all, is the number one.
It's a religion.
But basically, yeah, and everything else, basically sports wise, maybe a bit of basketball here or there, everything else falls by the wayside. It's basically just soccer, and that's it.
So you've been coaching in Spain for over a decade.
Yep.
Are you busy?
Yes, and again, it would be more, but not with Spanish. So the clubs are very busy, but they would be they would be more through tourism. So the place I was at, and I've actually I stopped coaching there in March, but I was there for 10 years. La Manga Club. It had a very, very steady stream of people in, out. It had its own hotel, a few days in the hotel, out, and then people also. There were however many houses on the resort, a lot. People would just, stay there. And again, Brits, Scandinavians predominantly. So golf here is still big. It's just not so big with the Spanish.
Oh, okay. So wait, so these are private courses, but tourists can get access?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's not a reciprocal thing. You could just, I'm coming in from a different country and...
It's public to an extent. It's private to an extent, but you can still get groups and still get people coming from outside in.
I see. So if I was coming to Spain, I would just be able to call the club and say, "I'm coming from the States. I'd like to play," and then, no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. No, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, I would love to spend more time talking about your coaching and your approach to coaching. And let's start with, finding the right coach. How do we find the right coach for ourselves?
I like to refer to what happens between a coach and player as sort of a relationship. Mm-hmm. And like any relationship, when you're first starting out, there's a little bit of, let's say, uncertainty. And there'll be some people where I suppose it would be love at first sight, where they basically try a coach out and that's it. But for other people, it might be a matter of actually just trying here and trying there and trying there, trying there. I think the overriding factor with it is trust. And that trust comes in a lot of forms. Not necessarily always do I trust them to help them with my game, but are they trustworthy people? Do I like spending time with them? Those are the characteristics that I'd say. And it's sort of hey, I can't take ownership of it, but sort of my thing that the coaching is a hell of a lot more than just the what we say as coaches, speaking for me as a coach, but also the hows, the whys, the whos, and so on. But in terms of actually picking a coach, I wish I could say, look for this. I don't really buy into the fact, honestly, of if they've got a proven track record, because for me, then that's basically just saying, okay, no one else can enter that club. There are some really, really good coaches who maybe aren't as visible online, who aren't maybe as outgoing or something, who are really top coaches, but you just might never have heard of them. So it's really just, maybe it's a bit of a cop-out, but it's really just seeing and trying and experimenting and seeing if that ties in with you. There isn't really a one size fits all with that.
Is there a lot of competition for, not for getting students, but I mean, do you have a lot of other golf instructors in the area that you're competing against? Or is it pretty much like, I'd like to take lessons in this part of the country, I'm just going to go talk to Anthony because there's not a lot of other people out there?
Yes and no. There are quite a few coaches around, but most of the players will stick to their own club or the club where they tend to frequent. I suppose it also depends if there's many pros at the same club. But only speaking personally, Fred, it's you'll find most people will just congregate and stick to one. Can I ask you? You've talked about it a bit in previous podcasts. What's your history with coaching, Fred? And
my personal history of getting lessons with teachings?
Yeah.
Slim to none.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had, I think I could say I've had less than 5 in-person lessons.
Firstly, I'll say there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think, I think coaches will often say, you have to get lessons and so on. You don't. You don't have to get lessons. But I think for a lot of people, it can help. Can I ask, how did that? Hey, I'm not going to interview you on this one, but how did what were the reasons behind that?
You are episode number 977. I've probably talked to over 500 coaches, many of them multiple times, and then the gamut of golf conversation from authors to fitness to all these different things. So I've always kind of wanted to prove my point that you can learn from instructors just by listening to them, by, whether you're reading their books or you're just hearing a podcast. And I have gone from being probably, when I first started playing, I was in my 40s when I first started playing. I was 42. And, at the beginning, you don't even keep an index or anything, but I was easily a 20 or around there somewhere. And now I'm hovering around a 10. And it's all by the conversations, all what I've learned from the instructors that I've had conversations. I mean, like, I've been doing this weekly for 19 years. Yeah. It's almost like a graduate level course that I've had in golf instruction and game improvement. So it's funny because I think frequently it's like, what am I going to do when I retire? Well, I'm going to keep doing the podcast because I do this for the fun of doing it and how much I learn. But it's like, maybe I'll go start taking golf lessons and get serious about really trying to lower my index. Because, sometimes my head is exploding with the amount of information that I get.
Yeah.
And, with the conflicting instruction.
I think with that, and it sort of links to something that I'm like keen to say.
Please.
It wasn't in jest where I said there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with not taking lessons. It's, to a certain extent, the secret's in the dirt. The body doesn't really know if you're taking lessons or not. The ball doesn't know if you're taking lessons or not. It's that what I would say, and I think this might be helpful to the listeners, is, and again, it might sound like a cop-out, the more I coach, the more I realize it's just, you have to sort of personalize everything. And I think some of the issue with golf, and I heard Kelvin talking the other day, and he was talking about like the online game and so on, which I'm not really that against. It's all generalized, and that's the issue. Any tip you read, any video you watch is by definition generalized. What you've done with it, Fred, like by not taking lessons, is actually just personalizing that situation to you. Okay, it's an extreme example because very few people are going to have 970 plus podcast episodes and have access to some really good minds. I'm not including myself in that, but
you are now included.
It's being no, but it's being able to personalize everything you do to you. And again, it sounds cliched and so on. There are very, very few truths. There are very, very few things that we really know in golf. And to a certain extent, like we said, for being able to pick a coach, it's about just trying things and experimenting with things and seeing what works for you. And speaking from a coach's perspective, it's the trick is really being able to personalize what's happening to the person in front rather than generalizing. Again, I know it is cliched. I know you've heard it all before, but the more I coach, the more I believe that, honestly.
Incredible. Well, yes. The primary motivation of this podcast was I need to learn a lot. How do I, and the focus is like, how do I become a better golfer? Oh, I'll just talk to golf instructors and put it up on the web. But These are my conversations. I've been blessed with the fact that a lot of people relate to these conversations and listen and see themselves in my voice. And so that's been very lucky. But that's never been my focus of like, how am I going to help all these people who are listening? It's how am I going to become better? And one of the things that I've really prided myself on is that I have found instructors that are not the most popular, that are not on TV, that don't have the biggest YouTube channels, right? As time has progressed and YouTube has become a main factor here. So I like to talk about focusing on and showcasing the unsung heroes of golf instruction, like yourself.
Well, again, I maybe wouldn't include myself in that, but hey, we're working towards it. The one thing I say with it is when it comes to coaching and golf improvement and so on, a couple of things. Why I really like this podcast is because it is open, and you used it before, you used the term to the masses. Sometimes when we read different articles and watch different videos and so on, we have to be aware that quote unquote content is maybe not geared towards the masses. A lot of the content now is geared towards really, really top players who practice a lot, who are really impassioned to improve and so on. I think there's a massive drop in I'll use the word information for people who maybe don't fall into that category. I always say I call it like a 90-10 principle, where I say 90% of the golfing content is for the 10% of people who either have a really low handicap or, like I said, are out there every day practicing and so on. It's not for the quote unquote average golfer who doesn't have the time to do that and has a family and so on. And maybe we'll jump in on a video here and another there, but isn't really going to be clicking on every sort of link. Again, like, to tip my hat to you, I think there's a massive space there. And I think when people do watch things and read things, it's just remembering this might not be for me, or made specifically for me. And it's just being aware of that when we do.
Okay, Anthony, please put your hat back on. No tipping to me. Because I've always felt very similarly that here in the States, watching the Golf Channel, I don't know if you have an equivalent or you get that, but the Golf Channel was always directed at single-digit, at low-digit handicap golfers. And there was not an approach, a voice for everybody who, can't practice once a week, hopefully can play once a week, have a passion for the sport, have a passion for its history, have a passion for everything that surrounds it. But, as one player I played with years ago said to me, you know what I want for Christmas this year? I said, what's that? He says, 2 good shots in a row. I mean, this is who we are. And I think that's 99% of golfers, are the ones who are struggling to get into the 90s or the 80s. But we're always compelled to try one more time. We want to go out again because golf will do that to you. You get one good shot that either sounds great or looks great. You're going, I'm coming back.
Absolutely. And I think, I can't call it a study, but I used to ask a lot of the people I coached, would you rather shoot your handicap or would you rather shoot your handicap or would you rather shoot 2 or 3 over your handicap, but hit it really well? And undoubtedly the reply was hit it really well. Again, using the personalized thing, you just have to play golf the way you want to play golf. And let's say the use of statistics now and so on is absolutely great, is pushing the game forward. However, it is dividing golf into right and wrong, into you should be doing this and should be doing that. Okay, I'm in the land of Ballesteros, but if you're in the trees and you just enjoy hitting nice shots, you probably know the safe shot would be to punch out sideways. But if for that 1 out of 50 time you're able to punch it below the branches and then cut it, and so on, and it works its way up onto the green, it will be worth it. It will be 100% worth it. And again, for a player, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. We have to play golf the way we want to. And again, because I'm a coach, I'll speak to coaches. I'd say actually promoting that, encouraging that in players, even if it might not help the score, depending on what the actual goal is. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. I always think, just last point on this, it's that coaches will often feel compelled to think everyone wants to get their handicap down. Everyone wants to. They don't. They just don't. A lot of people just want to hit nice shots. And I think coaches will go off sometimes or say, okay, right, they assume an 18 handicap, for instance, wants to get down to 12 or so on, because that's what they would have done. Okay, you need to be out on the putting green, doing these drills and so on. Not interested. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, it's actually for me encouraging that rather than resisting against it.
Well, there's so many things that you said there that I want to go talk about. The risk-reward element of a shot under the trees, hobbling around, blah, 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 right, as you described. that, that's why we call the show Golf Smarter, right? That you can see the flag, but you're not necessarily going to hit it, and you may end up with a double or triple bogey, where if you just go back out into the fairway, okay, you'll get a bogey. Let's walk away with that. So, yeah, and the audience you'll be able to hear the audience sing along with me on this, and one of our favorite lines is, never follow a bad shot with a stupid shot, right?
And I'd say with this, it's all dependent on what the objective is. If the objective is score, play smarter. And you wouldn't be able to say, all right, go for that shot if it's a 1 out of 50, like I said, because there's nothing smart about there's nothing smart about that. But if the objective is actually, if you're just playing with your friends and so on,
yeah, but you want to beat them. I mean, if you're playing with your friends, there's probably some competition and money being exchanged.
Yeah, it depends on your friends, I suppose. But again, if the objective is score, yes, but it's not always score.
Yeah,
that's what.
It's the next shot. It's always the next shot, which is, as we know, the hardest shot in golf is the next one. Right?
Absolutely.
Now, and the other part, you talked about the handicap, and that, let's also remember, it's like, do you want to play to your handicap, or do you want to, just have some good shots? The handicap is an indication of your potential, not your average score, right? That's why they take, of your last 20 rounds, they take the best 8. Say, you have potential of playing here. And as we recently learned from Joel Suggs, that what he calls the PGA, the bell curve of your scoring, which is poor, good, and average, right? And the bell curve being the top being the average, and then you've got poor, and everybody has that, and it could range with a single-digit player. It can range 7 or 8 strokes, and for a 20 handicap, it can range 15 strokes, but you've got that. So the handicap is, I'm not a big fan of that, playing to the potential. It's like, because then all of a sudden people are gambling on your potential. It's like, okay, what's your index?
Agreed.
All right, that's what you owe me 2 strokes. It's like, wait a minute, this is your course. You play from tees farther back than I do. Neil, are you listening right now? We're playing at your course. We're playing at tees that I don't usually play, and I have to give you 2 strokes, 3 strokes. Come on, man. There's got to be some balance here. We're even players, and we both know it. Yeah, but the numbers say you got to give me 3 strokes. Give me a break, man.
Do you know how? Because that actually. Do you know how it used to work? I can only speak for the UK, but before the changes in handicap, how it used to work over there? It wasn't the 8. It wasn't the 8 best. It was just the average. So anytime you played in a competition again, I can only speak for the UK. I don't know if it was the same in other places in Europe. You had your handicap, and if you played poorly, your handicap went up, and if you played well, your handicap went down 0.1, 0.2 or whatever. And there always used to be a thing of, the American system, blah, blah, blah. So I'm glad you're not the only one. You're an honorary Brit by the sounds of it, Fred.
Someday I'll make it there. I always wanted to go, and hopefully I got a big birthday coming up next summer. I'd like to make it. I'd like to make it over to the UK to get some golf in for that. Yeah, right. We'll talk about that later. Let's talk about instruction and personalizing. You talked about personalize versus generalize. Let's get deeper into that, of how you personalize for a golfer. And I don't like asking 2 questions, but I'll go ahead and do that. And how long does it take for you to be able to personalize your instruction for a student?
It doesn't take long. It just depends on how you see it. The thing I'd say, and I think this would be almost like a takeaway for anyone listening, and at least this is the way I see it. Try to work as much in what you know or in a realm that you know will work rather than hope will work. So when it comes to golf, there are actually very few things that we know help everyone. And particularly with the swing, Fred, there's there are very, very few things that everyone does that you can look on and the PGA Tour and say, okay, everyone does it that way. So with that, and if I could just go into detail with that, we know impact and we know ball flight. So everyone who is good will hit the ball first, then grass. And you were talking the other week about low point. That's what we know. Everyone will hit the middle of the face or around the middle of the face. It doesn't lean towards drastically off the toe and drastically off the heel. And everyone will have the club face that's functionally straight. If anyone's listened to Adam Young, those are 3 principles that he really goes by. And I completely agree. So once you have that, then you can branch off into, and there are other things that we know. There are certain movements, for instance, that we know basically everyone does. Is then actually, again, to a certain extent, experimenting different bits and seeing what works for you. And again, I'm not always the biggest proponent of right and wrong, good and bad. It's actually, to a certain extent, trying stuff, and the coach can do this or a coach can help with that in various ways, and seeing what works for you. The question that always sort of is in the back of our heads is, yeah, but could it be better? Could it be better? And that's where you might have to show a little bit of restraint of not actually just trying everything. The fact of the matter is, we don't know a hell of a lot. This is really positive, isn't it? We don't know a hell of a lot. And a lot of coaches will point at Furyk, for instance, and say, well, imagine if his dad had changed his swing, well, we'd never have heard of him. Well, to be fair, we don't know that either. If some changes went into Furyk when he was younger to make him, quote unquote, more conventional, he might have been a better player for all we know. So for me, it's working in a realm that you know will work and try to spend as much time in that realm as possible. Then it's seeing your patterns, seeing how you want to play, and then personalizing around those, rather than, hey, you know, the cliche, the typical one size fits all, trying to fit a model. It's that's not ideal when that happens.
First, I have to thank you for mentioning previous episodes that you've heard. So are you a listener? Really?
I am a listener, and I'm a self-confessed like golf nut or golf improvement nut, and definitely a golf coaching nut. So yeah,
that leads me to the question, and I truly appreciate you listening. But listening as an instructor, do you listen because of other instructors being on this podcast, and that you find this as additional study for you?
Point blank, yes, 100%. And I think you've got to keep your eyes open and your ears to the ground, and you've got to be aware of what so-and-so is saying and what so-and-so is saying. And again, that's where the experimental bits come in. It's like, okay, I might try that for a bit. It's not, though, it's being open to things but closed to dogma, is what I would say, is to actually be really critical and really self-critical. And I like to think for myself that I'm self-critical, is saying, okay, is this working? Does that work? Did that work? And when I listen to coaches, and I basically try to listen to everything, it's always almost with a critical eye, not a negative eye, but a critical eye of, is this good or is this bad? A lot of it's good, a lot of it not so good. And then I just find my own conclusions.
As do I. that is that is what we're looking for. It's like there's a lot of information that we receive and that we get, but it is sure great to be able to figure out how to separate yourself from all of. And if I hate to call it noise because I'm contributing to it, but there's a lot out there, and I will get an email from somebody saying that guy who was on last week really didn't connect with me, or they can say something a little more harsh than that. But their point is that it didn't connect, and I inevitably will write back and say, "Wait till next week, because you're going to have a different voice."
Yeah, and then there'll be something else. And again, there's nothing wrong with it disconnecting.
No.
That's
the point.
It's just exactly right. It's just deciphering, and again, being critical of. For me, it's if there are exceptions to the rule, it's probably not a rule. So it's sticking with that, and then it's being aware of preferences. You might have certain preferences, but at the end of the day, they're just that. It's not holding on to them for dear life. It's understanding their preferences and then working it your own way.
Now, your website is golfcoachinstitute.com. You work.
That's right.
Do you instruct instructors?
Yeah, so that's basically what I do now. So I said earlier, I left in March at my previous employment, and I just go full time on this now. So at the moment, I'm mentoring other coaches around some of the topics that I talked about today, and enjoying myself in the process.
I hope it's succeeding for you. I know that when recreational golfers, call them amateur golfers if you'd like, but recreational golfers that come to an instructor, and the instructor will ask the first couple basic questions, but the answer inevitably is, I want more consistency, I want greater distance. It's probably the number one and number two requests that 100%. Instructors get, and there's probably 3 and 4 there as well. But what is it when instructors come to you? What is number 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the requests that they have about, from you as a mentor to them? What do they want to improve on? What do they want to know that will help them become a better instructor?
It's a really good question. I would say only one. That what they're saying, they know isn't fully the case, isn't fully right. And I appreciate that more than anything because it shows to me that they're critical about what they're saying. You'll have, and I don't want to be critical of coaches here, but sometimes if I can let everyone get a peek behind the curtain of the golf coach here, there's a bit of a power trip that happens with coaching where someone's hitting it poorly, I change something, boom, they're hitting it well. How good am I? Brilliant. But on the flip side, there are cases where you say something and they don't get it and it's not working. Okay. And again, not everything, but a lot of the things we see online are edited. They're made to look like everything works every time, but it just coaching's really hard, and golf is really, really hard sport. So it's not going to be there every time. But with coaches, sometimes there's a sort of washing of their hands of responsibility of they just didn't get it, or they just got to put in the time. Whereas I say, well, actually, maybe you didn't get it. Yeah, maybe the advice needs to be better, or how you conduct the session needs to be better. So really, I'm positive when people come to me and saying, I just get the impression that what I'm saying isn't really the answer, because it shows there is a critical side. And especially starting out, younger coaches, it will be the case where it probably isn't the answer. And so a lot of people come and ask me for advice in that they're to a certain extent happy with what they're doing. Information-wise, they think is okay. But the application and so on, it's just they know it's maybe not fully there.
That's just like golf to me. It's your intention versus execution. Right?
100%.
The teacher, when you asked me about how many lessons I've had, that also included a weekend golf school. Early in the podcast, there was a golf academy in Arizona that my wife and I went to. My wife was like brand new to golf. She still is. She's not listening. I can say this. She says, "Yeah, I play golf." It's like, no, you don't.
I mean, she's a really good player.
No, you played 9 holes about 6 years ago. No, you can't. And she goes, "Well, let's go out and play." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't want to do that. It's not going to be fun for me." But we went to this golf school, and there was an instructor that I was working with at this school, to remain nameless, mainly because I forgot her name. But she was saying, "Okay, just do this." And I'm like, "I don't understand what that means." She goes, "Well, just do that." I'm like, "Do what?" She goes, what I'm telling you to do, what I'm showing. It's like, I don't understand that though. I don't understand how to execute that. How can you reframe it? Can you restate it? So I might be able to comprehend what you're saying. And it just came back the same way. So intention versus execution from a coach, as well as the amateur golfer, our intent
Absolutely
is
right.
so important here on every shot. And every student.
I mentioned earlier, and that's the thing I mentioned earlier about it being a relationship. And for a relationship, there has to be equal amounts of input and equal amounts of responsibility on both sides. So if the player is saying, "God, that coach was terrible," all the time, when they haven't maybe actually practiced what the coach was saying and so on, that's not great. But at the same time, a coach saying, "They just didn't get it. They're not that good." That's not great either. And it's a really important point for it. It's a cliched one, but really sort of top coaches will be able to say things that resonate and will be able to demonstrate that resonate and leave a mark on the player. It's one of those things that often gets said, "Okay, I didn't understand," and then they said it a different way than I did understand. It's absolutely right. And the really top coaches will be able to transcend what you even thought about happening in the golf lesson, not just through the result and the success you have in that golf session, but also the relationship that you have with them and the sport in general.
Yeah. So we talked about your website is golfcoachinstitute.com. Do you work with recreational and amateur players, or is you primarily focused on working with instructors?
It's just instructors at the moment. But there's when I was playing a bit, I would still just look at all the instructors' work on Golf Digest and so on. So there's still a hell of a lot of good stuff for players. And also, and I suppose it was almost the topic of the conversation today, all right, things that you can just keep an eye out in your own work with your coach, or if you are looking for a coach, there's a few useful pointers in there for you.
Well, Anthony, I truly appreciate your support of listening to the podcast and reaching out to have this conversation, because I found it absolutely fascinating and I've learned a lot. So thank you so much for coming on the Golf Smarter podcast.
Thanks, Fred. Honestly, you do a hell of a lot of good stuff. So, I was really, really happy to join.